Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Blue Butterfly Effect podcast. I'm so glad to be here. We're back after a little bit of a break. And our topic today is about the comparison or contrast or the difference between authentic joy and cheap dopamine or toxic dopamine. And it's really about the way we nurture and feed ourselves. And this topic was inspired from an experience I had recently. So, I had gone on a trip and I had been on my phone a lot during that trip. I was gone for like 10 days and I was promoting a class on social media. I was connecting with different friends, like looking for travel destinations, hotels, things like that. And also, there was a lot going on in the world. We're in election season, the Diddy stuff, which is like hard not to look at. Like the stuff in the news is it's just so wild. Like I remember us saying that it was going to feel like a circus, and it really does right now, like this shadow that's continuously being excavated. So the reason I bring this experience is because I was traveling and I was on this trip and I had my phone on me all the time. And what I noticed is I was on social media much more than I am. And just a little background, I'm someone that I don't like my phone on me. I don't like social media. I never have. Um, my husband laughs at me. He's like, "Aren't you so good?" And I'm like, "No, it's not about being good." And he's just kidding. But I've always known how destructive like our phones are. I've always understood on an intuitive level that this is not healthy. As beautiful, I mean, as innovative as it is and as helpful as it is, it's equally or more destructive. And so I found myself in this situation where I became like addicted to my phone, and it was like 10 days. That's all it took was like 10 days. And I remember coming back from my trip and noticing that every empty space I had between a client session or if I wasn't doing something with my kids, I was going towards my phone. I was looking at Diddy stuff. I was looking at political stuff that I normally don't engage in. And I
Right.
could feel my nervous system needing those hits. And I actually, what really scared me, I remember a few days ago, or like maybe a week ago, I had like an hour to myself and I couldn't remember what I used to do with those hours. Like I actually was afraid of being bored, and I haven't been bored in years. And I was like, I have forgotten what makes me feel good.
Mhm.
Like my brain had literally, I felt like been hijacked. And that was when I became aware of like, okay, like this is how dangerous this is. These phones, this addiction to this like cheap dopamine we get from it, these like quick hits of like instant gratification and excitement or fear. And we're going to talk more about that, but I wanted to check in with Millie to see like how the astrology is affecting this time and just what's going on that might be in relationship to this.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story because I think that it really, when you shared it with me before, one of the things that I realized it did for me is that it put into perspective how quickly that happens. For
Yeah.
I've always known you to have a very like healthy relationship and like strong boundaries around that, right?
Yes.
And it took 10 days
10 days.
or to feel it sounds like right if I'm hearing you correctly to be like completely like swept by it.
Totally.
Right. Mhm.
Totally off like track.
Right.
10
And so
days.
right, and so for someone like me, i have I can have a very unhealthy relationship with my phone. I mean, it is something that I have to practice to not be on. Like, it has to be an intentional decision. It has been part of like therapy discussions. It has, like, my partner, he points out, get off the phone, right? So when he says that, I'm like, holy shit, like, how long have I been on this fucking thing? Right?
Right.
You don't realize it. And he tells me, he's like, I don't think you realize how much you are on the phone sometimes. And that's such a, I don't know, it's like a distortion on the brain, right? So I notice that when I meditate, when I stretch, when I read, like these things that are slower in nature, right? That subsides.
Yes.
So I share that because I think it's important to remember that it's a practice, because that addiction is real,
Oh, yeah.
right? So I wanted to bring in the astrological perspective because I do think it's interesting. So this year we have been experiencing the energy of Jupiter in Gemini. Jupiter is this energy in the zodiac that expands and makes things bigger, right? So in in a in an integrated positive way, this can be the expansion of the self, right? The expansion of knowledge, the expansion of a sense of well-being, the growth of abundance, right? Whether internal or external. Um, it's known as a benefic planet in the zodiac because it can be very beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Jupiter in an unintegrated manner, and in the society that we live in, is a lot of overindulgence. So when you think about something like the phone, and that amplifies, that's that is an overindulgence, but it is also something that can take over. Like Jupiter's energy can has no bounds, right? Unless you practice something Saturnian, because Saturn is the planet of boundaries, you have to put boundaries on it. Otherwise, you will be consumed by it. That's Jupiter's energy. Gemini is the sign of information. So, and Jupiter and Gemini has been doing something really interesting to Pisces energy. Saturn and Pisces, Neptune and Pisces. Those two signs in the zodiac are at odds with one another. They create what we call a square. They create what we call um, an aspect of tension. They're at 90 degrees to one another. So just imagine a 90-degree angle, and you get to a corner. And that corner can feel like we are cornered. So think about that. When you think about that from the perspective of like just being on your phone, it can be pretty literal where you're just in the corner of your couch and just like, scrolling,
Yeah.
right? But that tension is not meant to exist over time. That tension is meant to erupt, right? And it'll erupt in your some way, in your mental health, in your physical health, right? If we're sticking strictly to like the cheap dopamine, and the usage of the phone, if we're sticking to that example, it will erupt in like a lack of sleep or interrupted sleep, like all the things, because there is something there that squares their catalyst for change. And if we're paying attention, that is telling us, look at what's coming up. And what is that telling you? Right.
Mm.
So, this Jupiter in Gemini has increased the amount of information that is out there, like more than usual, which is a lot already, a
Yeah.
lot of distortion, a lot of untrue things being put out there, especially with the creation of AI. Like there's so much out there that when we are not grounded, that energy will take over.
Mm.
And so one of the things I've noticed personally is that Jupiter and Gemini energy has made me more curious about things. And that's a double-edged sword, right? It has made me
Mm.
more curious about things. And it's like, what am I talking about? Like, what am I consuming? I've had to really do that. And what it has done is that it has made clear, at least for me, this is the relationship that you have with this. And you get to a point, or at least I've gotten to a point where I'm just kind of sick of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what you're saying is really helpful just to hear like this, like wanting that more, like in the lower expression of that. And I would go like on social media and I didn't even know what I was looking for.
Right.
And I would open it up and I was like, I'm not really interested in, I would find like, I'm not interested in being here. It's like walking into a bar and not wanting to drink. Like I find myself kind of kept walking into the bar, but going, I don't drink, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm someone who like for the past year, haven't read anything really. I mean, unless I've done some quick research, like for a podcast or something, but I haven't read a psychology book in like a year. Like I've taken a break. I've been reading utter fantasy. But what I've also been doing, I've just been listening to my soul. I've been like really listening to spirit. It's been a very spiritual few years where I've kind of shut the outside world off. I know there's research. I know there's stuff that I could pay attention to and get facts and figures and all of that. But I've really just initiated this journey with spirit to kind of explore like, what will I know on a spiritual level? What is the wisdom that's running through the collective that I can tap into? And what I find is those knowings match the research, right? You know, I'm
Exactly.
not surprised. My husband loves research. And so I'm not surprised when he says something that's research based. And I'm like, oh, I knew that on an intuitive level.
Mhm.
So my point in all this being is that I was finding myself walking into social media and going like, I don't want to be here. This is not a place that I've chosen to go, but it was so automatic.
Right.
Um, the other thing that I've noticed is my nervous system not wanting to calm down. And part of that's because election season. And I want to say this because this is so heightened. And I'm curious if you would speak to also the astrology around this is, you know, we have a month until the election. And I notice I want to fill the spaces so I don't have to sit in the unknown.
Mm.
Right. Like my higher self doesn't really care and is like, there's nothing I can do to control this. So I'm going to focus on my joy. But the traumatized part of me,
Mhm.
she's trying to fill time. Like
Right.
she's running, like I said, as we open this podcast, I'm running 82 miles per hour to get to that finish line as soon as possible. And
Right.
so there's this contradiction inside me. These parts of me that are arguing with each other. And I'm trying to figure out who's going to win on a moment to moment basis.
Yeah, that's nuts, right? I just this weekend, uh, we went to the grocery store. No, it wasn't even just at the grocery store. It was like an all day thing. I don't know what it was, but as soon as I woke up in the morning, it was like I was in a rush.
Mm,
I was in a rush. I don't know why. There were things we had to do, but we had all day. Like there was no need to rush. I was in a rush all day to where my partner had to literally like 3 times throughout the day. Can you be here? We don't have to rush anywhere. Like
I've
we
been around you. So if you rush, I've never seen you rush. So that's really interesting.
Yes, right? Exactly.
You're very methodical at the pace where I'm like flitting.
Exactly. So I say that because we have to pay attention to our nervous systems. We have to pay attention to when we're functioning in that way, right?
Mm,
What's happening? Like we have to wonder. And if we have
mm.
someone reflecting that back to us, that's a gift. Because I thanked him every time. He's like, what's going on? Like, can you just be here? Can we slow down? Can we slow down?
Mm.
And I'm like, I don't know what it is. I feel like I'm crawling out of my body.
Wow.
And so, if we're talking about like cheap dopamine, it's not just the phone, right? It's like some of the food we consume, like,
Yeah.
right? Like the energy that we're around, like so much stuff
Yeah.
that now that doesn't mean that we should never leave our homes, right? But I think that if we become aware of the things that stimulate us in a certain way,
Hmm.
at the very and not from a hyper vigilant place, but from a place of like, oh, that makes me feel that way,
Right.
right? Just to be aware, we can come back to ourselves because there's something again, it's like you're in a hurry or you're chasing something or like what? Right?
Right. Yeah. And I want to like be clear on what like toxic or cheap dopamine is or passive dopamine is. It's that instant gratification. It's anything that gives you a quick hit of like what we perceive as happiness, like a feel good. And some of the and so many what we're seeing is many people do not have really high dopamine levels, like good dopamine in their brains. We're seeing that. And then we're also seeing people who have to go on dopamine detoxes because they're Yeah, this is a new thing. They're going like on retreats, dopamine detoxes, because they're getting so much toxic dopamine. And so a lot of these are like social media breaks. So you get cheap dopamine from fast food, gaming, TV, porn, drinking, drugs, news, sugar, bad food. I could go on and on, like shopping, like any of those things that give you a quick high,
God.
right? And so now they have deep dopamine detoxes. And I've realized as you were talking, I'm the dopamine regulator in my house. Like I'm constantly feel like I'm energetically, it kind of makes me emotional. Like I feel like I'm not at war, but I'm having to protect my kids against
Yeah.
this like intense infiltration of just so many areas where cheap dopamine's available.
Right.
So many of their friends play games. So I tried to wait as long as I could before they play games. But also, I don't want them to feel isolated. They're homeschooled. They have a lot of fun playing games. So how do I regulate that time? How do I teach them to regulate it? But their prefrontal cortex is not developed. They're boys to like 25. So, like how do I support like their activities that promote good dopamine? Like sports create good dopamine. I'm not saying competitive sports necessarily, like, but I surf, good dopamine, gardening, good dopamine, art, anything artistic, creative, cooking, connecting. Like, like music is so beautiful. We're talking about things that you put effort in. Farmers are some people that have some of the highest dopamine levels, like positive dopamine, because you're investing time into creating something, and the reward of putting food on the table for your family. Like the reward is like showing up for something, having an intention, putting the effort in, and then seeing it, come to fruition. That's a different kind of dopamine that our
Right.
brains are meant to feed on.
Right.
So I just like when we're talking about this, I wanted to be clear is like the difference between the two. And,
Mm.
you know, I know that when I partake in cheap dopamine, it makes me feel kind of sick in my body. No,
Mhm.
actually, not kind of. It makes me feel sick in my
Right.
body. Makes me feel dysregulated.
Mhm.
And what happens is we're not meant to have all that like video games, for example, it gets higher and higher. Like because you keep like playing the game and then you go again and you're in this unrealistic thing, but the winning and the winning and the winning, and you don't have to really put any effort into it in the way that you would maybe growing food. But what happens is if when you come out of that video game, your brain's like, I need more, I need more, I need more. And then you start to feel depressed. Then you kind of start to feel sluggish and not motivated. Nothing in life seems as sparkly as like, say, porn or your video game or shopping or fast food. So I just said a lot there, but it's a big deal in our culture right now.
It is, and I think that that is so helpful because you just named a lot of like things that, because of the nature of the society that we live in, it can just feel normal,
Right. And
right?
that's so scary.
Right. Right. I can't there is a documentary on Netflix, and I cannot remember it for the life of me. Um, that talks about the dangers of social media and why social media, for instance, right? Like the scrolling on the phone, like it is created to be addictive.
They did it. Yeah, they did it on purpose. They knew how the brain worked and they admitted it. Yes, I can't remember what it's called and I haven't seen it cuz I think it'll scare me, but my husband watched it.
Yeah. And so you have they interview people who used to work for Google or, Facebook and all of these big tech companies, and they would say like, "No, I will not allow my children." Like they were part of creating this, and they would not allow their own children to
Right.
use this
Right.
because they understand the severity of what it does to the brain and therefore the nervous system. So
Yes.
when we look at it from this perspective, we have to ask different questions,
Mm,
right? The first one being why? Why would they create something at a mass scale like that, right?
right.
And everyone can come to their own conclusions to that. And once you answer that why for yourself, how do you begin to take your power back? So that leads me into the astrology of not necessarily just the topic of what we're talking about right now, but the astrology of the exacerbation, is that how you say that word? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounded, yeah, it's one of those where when you say it, it sounds weird, but you're saying it right. I think exacerbation. Exacerbate.
That's
I
okay.
don't know.
No, Irene. So this, of all of the things that again are normal, that are air quotes normal, and information, and it's almost like knowing all the things is normal now.
Right. Right.
Um, Jesus, like knowing all the things is normal now. Seeing all the things, and almost like it's almost like also being like in multiple places at once, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Energetically, you are.
Right, right. So to me, this feels very much like, yes, Pluto in Aquarius. Um, as we talk about the shadow of technology, for instance, right?
Mm.
The shadow, Pluto of technology, Aquarius, if we're making it very simple, we are already experiencing it, and Pluto hasn't really fully gone into Aquarius yet. As we,
Mm.
currently it's even still back in Capricorn. So what does that mean? It means that we're being shown the shadow of what can happen, and that as Pluto continues to move into Aquarius for the next 20 years, the evolution of technology will transform the landscape of our physical reality, like in
Yeah.
ways that our minds cannot fathom. Okay. So, if that's the case, and in the past couple of years, something like social media was created with the intent to become addictive,
Yeah.
we can't put it past anyone who is, powerful in tech to continue doing that in more ways, in more intelligent ways,
Mm-hmm.
to manipulate, which is
Mm-hmm.
also a Plutonian quality, overpower a Plutonian quality, our minds.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
so when we look at that, that is fascinating to me, because I'm like, oh, that's dark.
Mm-hmm.
That's dark.
Mm-hmm.
We have Uranus and Taurus, which has been there for a few years now, since 2018. And so much of Uranus and Taurus, Uranus will switch signs in 2025 and move into Gemini. Uranus and Taurus has represented the nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
because Uranus represents kind of like the technology in us, right? So
Mm-hmm.
our nervous system, I feel, is a technology within us,
Yeah,
right? The brain is
definitely.
the computer, and then the computer informs the rest of, the everything else that goes down from that space.
Mm-hmm.
Taurus is the sign of the body, the senses, the felt sense experience of something.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all of these things at work, and it's important to pay attention to how our bodies feel. And I know that we've talked about that before, and it's a pretty popular topic now, like on stuff, right? On all the things. But it becomes that much more important as we understand where the astrology is headed, and where that can take technology,
Yeah.
and all of these things that serve to give us that cheap dopamine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything is instant, everything is immediate.
Yes.
And I understand the convenience of it all, right?
Yes.
I don't go to the grocery store if I don't have to. Why would I?
Mm-hmm.
I can have my groceries delivered,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't I don't have to go anywhere I don't want to. That is that's a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's happening is that there is a disconnection. Like I think there is a a bit of a distortion, a bit of like a redefining of what reality is.
Mm.
And when we bring that back to our bodies will feel that in our minds, in our brains, there's a distortion of what reality is.
Yeah.
So it's going to feel out of whack.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we've normalized the feeling out of whack,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like more than ever, and this is from a really compassionate standpoint, it's time to like reclaim our present moment, our awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons I have such strict boundaries around my phone, again, is not because I'm so good, like Claire would say. It's because for 26 years of my life, someone else controlled my nervous system, and that was my mother. My nervous system was not my own. My body was not my own. My energy was not my own. So this device comes along, and I'm like, fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck you if you think you're going to take my well-being and who I am over, because I've already been under control. You know what I mean? I've already like submitted in that way. And so there's this like rebellious part of me that's like, no. Now, and like I said, I get sucked in sometimes, and then I notice how disoriented I am, how I feel so lost. And
Yeah.
everything I've worked so hard for, it's not gone, but it's like, isn't it amazing like how much harder it is to find your way back than it is to fall away? Like falling away from your practice or your regulation takes 2 seconds, but coming back to it, it's
Yes.
that like seductive nature of like discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
So I say all this because, again, it's all out there. We know this, but
Mm-hmm.
how often are we stepping in and like initiating making a change? We're like giving into it. We're letting ourselves be seduced by these objects. And that
Right.
scares me. And it scares me for me and for my family and for anyone I love and for our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so what do we do about it? And I think the thing we do about it is begin to develop a compassionate awareness of like that day I was like, wow, look how far away I am from knowing what brings me joy, all over like a 2-week period. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I had to let go. Oh, I love to look at my garden. I love to read. I love to
Mm-hmm.
take naps. Like I love to like be creative. I just couldn't remember any of the things. And so I was really compassionate. And now as I notice my nervous system wants to stay heightened, because I
Mm-hmm.
think we can get used to having a heightened nervous system. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like watching myself want to stay there. And I'm going to have to compassionately find a way to say like, hey, I know this like election is coming. I know the world feels really off kilter. I don't know how much different it is than it was years ago, but for whatever reason, it feels heightened. I need to find ways that like nurture me and soothe me. And I think that's the thing is rather than being soothed by more information, more news,
Mm-hmm.
wisdom someone else is spouting, like, can I soothe myself?
Mm-hmm.
Can I do something to soothe myself? And what soothes me? And I'm seeing children being soothed by these devices.
That
That
is,
terrifies me.
yes, that is
Like
so scary.
they're so unsettled, they need it so bad or they can't calm down, and like they don't know how to soothe themselves without it because it's quick and it's easy. And this is hard. It's hard for parents, it's hard for kids. So just like anyone listening, like what cultivates authentic joy and peace?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things you love that they're not going to give you a quick hit? But man, if you sat and read a book, not on your phone, because they've really done studies that actually reading an actual book is better for your brain, it's better for
Right.
your memory. Like they've done studies.
Mm-hmm.
What is something you could do today? Like, could you go outside, like connect with a friend, like sit in silence? I don't know what your jam is, but how can you find what like rocks your world other than instant gratification?
Right. Yeah. It's so it's so bizarre how far away we've gotten from delayed gratification.
Yes.
Like, and it's not even that delayed. It was just the way things were.
Right.
Right? It was
Like
just the
standing in line,
right. Exactly. That's the perfect example. Exactly right.
waiting for your food at a restaurant,
Right.
actually having a conversation.
Right. And those moments I have practiced. It has had to be an intentional practice.
Mm.
Don't pull out your phone.
Mhm.
Like, I've had those moments, right? And
Mhm.
so, as someone who has this is something that I've had to become very aware of, I really invite you to, as Ashley mentioned a few moments ago, like, look at this from a place of compassion, because it is like the softening into the reality of your relationship with your device that is actually going to allow you to understand it's not just that I'm like addicted to my phone. Is what I started realizing is, oh, I'm avoiding uncomfortable thoughts, I'm avoiding uncomfortable feelings, like whatever it is. So I reach for my phone because then I don't have to think about it,
Mm.
right? But these are only realizations that have come when I have said, no, that does not have more power over me. What's actually happening here? What's going on here?
Right.
Right? Walking helps a lot, reading helps a lot. Just those things that just take time.
Yeah, it's that time that slows you down.
Yes. And for someone who, and I've shared this with you before, like who like measure who is has been used to measure everything, like
Mhm.
measuring time, measuring calories, measuring money, like all of these things, right? Everything, and it was kind of disguised from a perspective, or disguised behind, like, what's the word? Efficiency,
Mm.
right? It's like, no, just slow down. Everything
Mm.
will get done. Everything is done. Nobody's chasing you,
Right.
right? And it's such a powerful way to reclaim ourselves back. It's such a
Yes.
powerful way to reclaim our power back. And I say that because where the astrology is headed from the collective, I think that there are a lot of great things that can come for us. But that grounding energy, that embodied energy, that is not something that is necessarily highlighted in the astrology.
I
We're
was going
headed.
to ask you, like, how do we work? Sorry to interrupt. I just went while you're going there. How do we work with this progression in technology
Mhm.
and feel hopeful as we become more disembodied?
Right. So we're going from an era where there has been a lot of earth energy, right? Pluto has been in Capricorn, Uranus has been in Taurus. We came out of like Jupiter and Taurus. So this emphasis on earth energy. Earth
Mhm.
energy is grounding, right? In a higher expression, it's grounding, it's more embodied, it's more like here now, it's slower in
Mm.
nature. But we're really heading into an era of air energy.
Mm.
And air is it's very up here.
Mm.
It's facts and knowing, and you know, there is a lack of grounding. And so we then have to become very responsible for how we ground ourselves, for how we embody ourselves, because the astrological energy is just changing.
Yeah.
It's just changing for bigger reasons, for the collective reasons, like for reasons we don't fully yet understand. But when we really just look at the elements that are going to be at play, it's a lot of fire, a lot of air.
Mm.
Fire and air energies are very masculine. They're
Mm.
very action oriented. They're very logical. They're very strategic, right? Um, they're not very patient. So, so I can see how that's going to be an energy where we can get very swept away, right? So when we think of like virtual reality, for instance, I have no doubt in my mind that virtual reality is going to become such a reality for people that being outside of that is like in their brains, there's going to be a distortion of what reality is,
Wow.
right? That's terrifying to think about.
Yeah.
So it really becomes our responsibility. What are the slow things that we do, right? The reading, the walking, yoga, working out intentionally, right? Not trying
Mhm.
to like measure things. I think that anything that we do with our bodies that helps us connect like that mind muscle or mind body, right? Is so important. So important. So,
Mhm.
so, so important. Um, but it really becomes our own responsibility.
Well, and it reminds me of doing things, gosh, with the way the world is and social media, with everything has to be a production or you have to create something with like, it reminds me of how important it is to go back to just the creating of something,
Right.
regardless of the result. Like
Right.
not focusing on the end result, but remembering a time where you could have an idea and work on it in private and not share it with everybody and get joy from it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And not that there's anything wrong with like sharing it on your platform, but there was a time when we were creating and doing things just for our own joy. And
Mm-hmm.
now every part of our lives is an opportunity to share. And again, not judgment. And I would say, could we be more discerning? What is for us? Like,
Right.
where are those private, precious moments that are
Right.
for us?
Right.
And what actually authentically wants to be shared? Like, can we remember what it's like to cook a meal and make it beautiful and eat and just have it in the intimacy of our own lives? Yeah. And again, not judgmental, but we've lost that. We've lost our personal joy,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of just feeling that for us because we get something from putting it out there,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and is it enough just to enjoy it yourself? I don't know. I was just thinking about that.
No, well, that makes a lot of sense. Because I think that the notion of authenticity, and I don't mean to digress, but I think that it's part of the conversation. The notion of authenticity has become I am authentic if I share all of the parts of my life online.
And that's not authentic.
That is not anywhere near the definition of authenticity, right?
No, no,
Authenticity is essentially living a soul-led life.
right.
Is asking yourself, do I want to do this? Yes or no? Right? Do I want to talk to this person? Yes or no? Does this work make me happy? Yes or no? Like the checking in with your soul, with yourself.
Mhm.
And does your life and the way that you experience it feel stable to you, feel grounding to you, feel safe to you, feels
Mhm.
embracing to you? Nowhere in there is there a search for perfection, but there is a search of honesty with yourself,
Yes.
right? That definition has completely like lost its meaning in this thing. um I will say that I'm hopeful that the astrology, or what the astrology shows us, is that people will be able to see through things,
Mm.
right? That, for instance, like the people who have created something by showing every part of their life, right? And it's like, first off, they're not showing every part of their life. They're showing a lot of their life, but
Mhm.
they're not showing every part of their life. They're still showing what they want you to see.
Right.
People are going to like get tired of that. Here's this person again telling me
Yeah.
about their shit.
I was just thinking, Blair, I gotta, it's not gonna be funny now, but he has like something about hot snakes, hot takes with hot snakes being your shit. Like people taking pictures of their shit. So I don't know if that translated, but when you were like, yeah, with the shitting, you always thought it'd be funny to do hot takes with hot snakes. Sorry, we have gone off the
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. But anyway, where was I?
We're talking about authenticity,
Right.
and that people will start noticing like the trend, being transparent, like seeing through
Yeah,
what's authentic and what's not. God, I hope so.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so too. I hope so too. And it's all the calling back to the self. I think there is a strong calling back to the self. And if we can do that, we can live a more regulated life.
Mm.
We can live a little bit more grounded, right? Embodied. Just let's take it easy.
Yeah.
But yeah.
My giggle button has been tricked. And there's no going back. But I think we're complete, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we're complete. Is there anything you want to share that you're up to?
What am I up to? Okay, yeah,
End of your readings?
right. Um, so I am now offering the year ahead readings for 2025. Such a big year ahead. Such a big year ahead. I really invite you to book your reading. It's a 75-minute reading. We go month to month. Um, I'm not just telling you what's happening. I'm actually reading your chart month to month and letting you know what planets are going to do what, and the potential of manifestation, and what you can expect, and how you can, somewhat prepare, but in a way where you're intentional with how you're showing up. Um, those are 75-minute readings. They are on my Instagram. They are on my site. So I invite you to that. Those are a lot of fun to do every year.
And please check out her YouTube channel. It's so supportive and helpful. It's beautiful, beautiful from the wisdom that you radiate and emanate. It's just so like I find it like, oh, there's Millie and I get to listen to what's going on. And it's just very supportive. Like it's soothing. It's like soothing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's also something else yeah, I have the reason that I really enjoy YouTube. It's because it's slower. It's slow,
Yeah.
right? And I can extend myself, and I can just be with the information and deliver it, and not feel rushed to have it done in 90 seconds, right? So
Oh, I love that.
yeah, I invite you to check out the weekly forecast on YouTube.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Millie. I love this conversation. It was really fun.
Good.
And sending love to all of you. I know these are interesting times, and I just hope everyone can hold themselves with compassion as they move through this part of their journey and the collective journey.
Mm-hmm.
And we will see you soon. Until next time.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and hit that notification bell to be updated on new videos.
Click the video on screen to watch more episodes.